I could ask IT colleagues to start the recording. Right. Okay, Christine, I've got the Senate apologies.
Yep, thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. I have Councillor Douglas Reid.
Present.
I have an apology from Councillor Jim McMahon, Councillor John McFadden.
Present.
Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Here.
Councillor Maureen Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Ian Linton.
Here.
Councillor Graham Barton.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Barry Douglas.
Apologies.
Thanks, Councillor Mackay. Councillor Neil Ingram.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Claire Maitland. Here. I have an apology from Councillor Drew Filson. Dr David Lewis.
Yeah.
Harriet Johnston.
Here.
Thank you. Babs Mowat.
Here.
And Jackie Livingston.
I'm here.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Christine. Okay, we've now got the part for the declaration of interest. I don't think it was in particular today, if members have anything. Okay, now going to the big report. That's our East Ayrshire Performance 23-24 Outturn Summary Report. So, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. This is the end of year East Ayrshire Performance Report, and it shows that if we exclude the financial outturn for our services and spend a moment on the corporate council-wide financial matters, council tax, non-domestic rates and the like, then the council ended the year with a surplus of £2.2 million. That's due to us receiving more council tax income than anticipated. But importantly, members, it's also following an adjustment that we've made following a review of the accounting provisions that you had approved some time ago. And as you know, we're required to review and reassess the money we'd set aside for potential liabilities that we hold at 31st of March each year. And we reassessed our provision that we had for equal pay. And we now only have a handful of claims to pay. And once we make those payments and make a pay over to HMRC for tax and national insurance, then our equal pay provision will have ended. And you know that some time ago we removed equal pay as a risk on our risk register. So members, we're transferring about £1 million from what was in the equal pay provision. All claims have been paid. And so that liability has now concluded. And that has also led to that £2.2 million surplus for the council. The table at paragraph 9 sets out the annual budgets and the actual spend at year end. And it shows that in respect of service concessions, which is that adjustment we made in February for our PPP and our NDP schools, that we have an additional £2 million that's been added to the earlier figure of £16.7 million. And that's because we've included that adjustment that took place when we moved to the 31st of March and the 1st of April. It takes that balance to £18.7 million, and that additional £2 million has been added to the existing total. But you know, members, that you set aside the previous figure alongside the pension figure to create that £40 million pot for early intervention and prevention for the next 10 years. And so this extra £2 million that was generated at year end provides you with extra financial headroom for the year ahead. As is always the case with the end of year reports, we note the transfers to and from reserves. As part of the budget, we removed some funds out of renewals and repairs, and I'm seeking approval today to add £700,000 back into that fund to bring it back up to its previous levels. You also know that in terms of our earlier East Ayrshire Performance Report, that Q3, we tend to see a reprofiling of the capital programme. That means that our in-year debt charges will be lower than anticipated. And again, we are asking approval to transfer that underspending debt charges to the capital fund because it's simply because of timing and what we needed as we go forward. Moving on to our services, you know that many of our services have experienced significant pressures throughout the last year, and while work was undertaken to reduce the level of in-year variances, the consolidated year-end overspend for our services is just over £11 million, which will be carried forward as a first charge against the 2024-25 budgets. Paragraph 14 provides details of the outturn for education. It notes an overspend of £3.5 million, with £500,000 of that due to early years, which is an improving position, and £3 million for additional support for learning. And £2 million of that £3 million is related to transport costs, with the additional £1 million being additional staff costs. And that's as a result of increased demand and increased teacher pupil numbers. You know, members, that those two reviews on early years and ASN are in progress. They are seeking to bring budgets back into line and back into that financial resource that's available, and that they will be reported back to Cabinet after recess. Within communities and economy, the combined services have an overspend of around £1.5 million, predominantly due to waste, ending the year £1 million over budget, and some slight overspends in facilities and property management in Ayrshire Roads Alliance. As you're aware, members, a few weeks ago, you received a presentation on the options for waste collection, and that was presented as part of our councillor conversation, with option 4C highlighted as the potentially preferred delivery model. Colleagues in my service have then spent the last few weeks reviewing the financial implications that flow from option 4C, and I'm happy to say this work has concluded, which will facilitate the waste review report being presented to you after recess. Members, you know that I've highlighted the significant financial and demand pressures that impacted on health and social care last year, with the previous East Ayrshire Performance Report highlighting a financial pressure of around £3 million. Unfortunately, due to substantial increase in demand in the last quarter of the financial year, the service ended the year with an overspend of just over £6.5 million, with the majority of this relating to community care, as the service supports care at home, continues to ensure that we have no delayed discharges, and importantly, the service continues to meet all assessed care needs that exists in our communities. Given the budgetary requirements of the Integration Joint Board, colleagues will look to use the IJB uncommitted balances to bring the year-end figure back into balance. However, this will consume a significant level of the available reserves, and therefore colleagues in health and social care are identifying options to deal with service demand and return the budget to a recurring balance position. With that work taking place now and concluding through a report that will be presented to the board at a later date. Against that backdrop, it's heartening to see that paragraph 23 provides details of the council's reserves and service balances at 31st of March. The general fund uncommitted balance has increased to just under £12 million, 3.03%. So we're just over the 3%, which is really helpful, given the possibility that we'll use that to give us some headroom to make those changes that we need in terms of the service demands. It also notes that the total council reserves are £63 million, with £32 million of these being service balances that have been created and held in line with our council's reserve strategy, which prevents quick spend taking place at 31st of March, with services able to carry forward any underspends into following year. Within the housing revenue account, ended with a small surplus of around £200,000, but we're seeing some really positive information here. We're seeing higher rent income levels, lower void property costs, and reduced debt charges. These are offset by additional maintenance costs and additional costs for equipment and adaptations. And as you know, members, that £175,000 of a surplus in the HRA needs to be earmarked because it's tenants' money and held within the HRA, taking the cumulative HRA balance to just over £23 million. On page 9, we begin to set out some of the high-level information on the capital programme, noting that work continues on Dunlop Early Childhood Centre, but there has been some delay due to adverse weather, material supply issues, and changes in design, recognising that Dunlop is the council's first passive house certified building. There's been some delay due to the nature of the construction and indeed the design process. As a result, costs are expected to exceed the tender value of £2.9 million by around £300,000. And colleagues in facilities and property management note that these additional costs can be contained within the funding envelope for the school. Paragraph 29 also builds on the work that was at previous council in terms of our capital programme, and notes the works at On-Thank Primary School Supported Learning Centre, where it's proposed that works around changes to the external space, internal accommodation, toilets and changing areas are prioritised, with the final scoping plans being initiated, with work to progress the upgrades to the fencing and internal configuration to increase toilets and changing facilities taking place over the summer. Finally, member, and unusually at paragraph 30, we give a background to the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Scotland Act 2000, or RIPSA, as it's known. This notes that this refers to specific powers that permit the council to make observations of a person in a covert manner, for example, without the person's consent, which could ordinarily constitute interference with the person's right to privacy. The Act provides the legal framework for public authorities and the inspection regime to monitor activities. In line with procedures devised by the council, covert surveillance cannot take place without authorisation, and we use this end-of-year East Ayrshire Performance Report to provide details of the number of authorisations ever sought between January 23 and December 23. And in line with previous year's reports, this report notes again that no authorisations were sought in that period. Members, the following paragraphs are covered in more detail in the covering report, and so, Chair, with your approval, I'll stop there and happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Joe, for a thorough report there. Just obviously some of the things that you pointed out in terms of well-being, that's a bit of a worry that in terms of the overspend there. But as you say, there's no delayed discharges, and we don't have any waiting list for any requests for assistance. So that's positive. But as you said, we'll all be working on that over the next few months. What's the kind of detailed plan on that? Just a wee bit more in the bones on that, Joe?
Yes, yeah.
Health and social care through the IJB. Yeah.
So Chair, what would happen is the integration scheme sets out the roadmap for this. So there'll be a financial recovery plan being created by Craig and the team that will have options on it, and will also involve discussions with the council and with health, and with that recovery plan being presented to the integration joint board members at a later date.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Joe. Any other questions or comments? Ian's first, then Maureen. Ian.
Yep, Dougie, just on the same point as you raised, I mean, I feel really strongly that, good behaviour should be rewarded. I think that, that we do exceptionally well in terms of delayed discharges, yet we don't seem to be getting any financial compensation coming from Ayrshire and Arn for keeping people out of hospital. So something I think we really need to pursue. I mean, I don't think Ayrshire and Arn are in a position just now financially to maybe honour the commitments, but, I think we should be contacting the Scottish Government, flagging this up, because, we're doing the right thing here, and we just seem to be penalised for it.
Yeah, I mean, we're making representation already through COSLA, but if we have to go directly to the government, we won't. Eddie, you? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. It's about the same matter, and just to say that, we've been doing a review of the integration scheme, which is the scheme between the council and the health board that establishes the IJBs, including the financial arrangements, and indeed Joe has been leading the Pan-Ayrshire work on the financial arrangements. It's something that Craig and myself would anticipate bringing to members, hopefully, and before recess, and if not then after, to actually just detail out some of the reasons and exactly what's been discussed here about that risk and reward, if I can call it that, to make sure it's properly dealt with. So it is something we'll be coming back to you about in the very near future.
Thanks, Eddie. Maureen?
Thank you
Claire.
very much. And may I start just with any points or questions that I want to make, just staying on the same theme, please, in terms of the IJB. I fully agree with what Ian has said, and yourself and Chief Exec, in terms of, we do a great job in terms of not having delayed discharges, making sure that all our identified needs are actually assessed. We know that isn't the case, unfortunately, across all of Ayrshire in the same way. And I would fully agree that making direct representation, both through COSLA, but also very specifically, because I think it is clear to everybody that we perform quite differently as an IGIB to really other IGIBs across Scotland, is certainly something that I would endorse. I know, and perhaps Craig or Chief Exec would want to come back on this, that we have done something slightly different in terms of trying to rebalance our position within the IGIB in terms of what our percentage of in-house community care is and what our percentage is externally. Again, I suppose I have got some concerns, and I'm sure those will be shared by other members, that we might find ourselves pushed against this financial position to look again at what our qualifying for care position actually is, and again, what the criteria to be actually in receipt of care is. That's, of course, some real concern for us going forward. So I would like some comments on that, please, first of all, before I move on to another area. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. No, I think that's really helpful, and I certainly would be minded to write directly to the Minister, just with our concerns expressed by yourself and Ian and others. And I know Claire's want to come in as well. I can see. I'll bring in Eddie first, and then I know Claire's want to come in on the same subject.
Thanks, Chair. There are a number of areas up there that certainly will be the areas that the officers will be looking at in terms when they come to the IGIB about how they can manage the budget. So, one of the areas, like Councillor Mackay was talking about is eligibility criteria. And I do know that Eric is working actively on a paper. So we as a council are one of only 2 councils in the country that, deal with there is 4 stages of eligibility: critical, substantial, moderate and low risk. And we are one of only 2 councils that actually do critical, substantial and moderate. The others only do either critical or critical and moderate. So one of the ways that we are going to have to look at that is, what is the eligibility criteria for care? We cannot have people who have critical needs sitting on a waiting list when there is someone with moderate needs getting a resource. So that's the type of discussion I think that will take place at the IGIB. It's also right about how we look at the balance of care. Right back to 2005, we've had a commissioning strategy, and it was at that time, in a previous role, I wrote a paper that spoke about we would come out of providing direct residential care, and we would work with the independent sector doing that. On the whole, at that time, we had a figure of 70% in-house, 30% external for care at home for older people, and care for adults with learning disabilities, etc. That tends to be the third sector. Folk like Enable, etc., who have expertise in that area, tend to do that. And that was our overall commissioning strategy for that. One of the variables in that is that 70-30 split, and it's certainly something that has to be looked at in terms of how we balance that, in terms of both the cost and the availability of care. And again, that's going to be one of the things that I know the IGIB is going to have to consider. It's not only about cost, but we can't hide sometimes it is about cost. It's also about flexibility of what you directly employ and what you can commission on and off as well. And of course, the other factor that's come in over that period is self-directed supports and people's rights to choice around that too. So these are matters that are delivered through the council, but they're commissioned from us by the IGIB. And I would anticipate that following considering at the IGIB that we would see substantial directions coming to us about a direction of travel in terms of that recovery plan. The council and the health board, when they receive the recovery plan, can either accept it or they could choose to fund more money to get back into it. which would obviously put a pressure, you know, like across the council or the health board in terms of doing that. So I suppose, and we've always had a really good relationship between the council and the IJB. These are matters that we will have to deal with in terms of looking at that £6 million gap and how we close that £6 million gap.
Like I said, Brian,
May
Claire, I'll
I
bring Maureen back.
also, it's just to pick up on one small point and thank the Chief Exec, and that is in terms of, is any of that overspend, particularly in that last quarter, due to a need for us to have employed any agency staff to fill in any gaps in staffing that we were experiencing at all?
To be honest, I don't know the detail. I think earlier in the year, in Marion's service, they had used some agency staff for social work rather than social care. But I think the last time I was told, and I don't know if Amanda can confirm this, that actually she'd managed to fill all our posts and we'd backed off using agency staff.
Thank you.
Chair, I can confirm
Yeah,
that Mary
Amanda.
managed to fill all our posts now, so doesn't require the agency staff ongoing.
Yeah, I was aware of that. Claire.
I think most of what I was going to ask has been answered. However, when we're doing this review, it would be interesting to know how much it would cost us if we didn't have the delayed discharges and the knock-on effects and other partnerships and etc. And that would be an interesting way to look at it. I'm glad that we're looking at this, as they were putting people at the heart of what needs care or who needs care, and we will deal with the finances after it. I've been dealing with another authority, and the difference is stark. We do it right here. It might not look right on paper, but we absolutely do it right. So I would love to know what the cost would be if we didn't have the delayed discharges, and if that could be incorporated into the reviews, just as a better understanding for everyone. Thank you.
I think that will be absolutely, could see Eddie in his head, and I would agree with that as well. So we'll make sure that's done, Claire. Maureen, let you back.
Sorry, thank you very much. And it is to move on to the issue of education now. And again, it is to look at what the position is there in terms of the overspend specifically, and also to look at, again, I know how well the council really work very hard to manage our own business, but it's now to cast an eye to the position that we are being set from elsewhere, and where are we in terms of, have we agreed? My understanding is that letters have been received from ministers in terms of teacher numbers, and those will obviously have a significant impact on the budget. Are we in a position in relation to confirming or not confirming, or in negotiations with Scottish Government in relation to funding for that? Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. We're not currently in a position to sign that off and say that, and I think we're in the majority of the councils in Scotland. I know there's meetings taking place in Causal later in the week with ministers, and the deadline's been extended to the 12th of July, so we have a wee bit more time, but there's, as it currently stands, we're not in a position to sign it off in terms of this authority, but I can assure you we'll be making strong representations, some of the issues in relation to accepting our position in terms of rural depopulation and how that affects our service when we've got a fallen school roll, really needs to be taken into cognizance. And I can give you that assurance, but we'll update, give members updates, including yourself, Maureen, as regular as we can. But we've had that wee bit of extension in terms of when the letter's got to be submitted. I don't know. Can you add in?
And through you, Chair, I think the most recent correspondence was welcome in terms of recognising that There'll be movement in FTE adjustments, recognising those councils that have a falling role, those that have that transition from being one of the 9 SAC authorities in that funding going national, and also around those authorities that experienced a drop in both education GAE and education deprivation GAE, of which we were one. So that gives us some reassurance, but certainly I know that probably through leaders and through the chief execs and through Solace, I know that Directors of Finance are also actively engaged in this piece of work as well, and spoke with colleagues as recently as yesterday around the work that we are trying to do to ensure that we can get surety on the funding that's available, while at the same time providing that confirmation to government wherever we can.
Thanks, Joe. Eddie, do you want to come in as well?
Yeah, again, one of the areas that I feel we always need to make sure we're clear about. Sometimes we use the term fall and roll, and we know that in some of our areas we do fall and rolls, in other areas we see pressure on our schools. And, you know, with some of the things around GAE, it's relative falling rolls, because actually we see some areas in Scotland that are increasing significantly, and that therefore means we have a lower proportion, although our whole numbers sometimes might not change. There is no doubt the long-term trend is down, but there is not a start fall just now. I think we'll be looking at some of the numbers. So it's such a complicated thing that, you know, we need to be really careful what we're doing around this. But, you know, we all know that there is significant funding, you know, that we're not getting, you know, that we were getting, and also our GAE, because of our relative number of children are going down, whereas sometimes we're not seeing a start number in the actual number. So complicated business around it, but it certainly is something that, as you all know, we're working hard right across the council in terms of how we deal with that.
Thank you very much. And may I just again say, I know the work that finance and our education colleagues actually put into all of this. I think the frustration is that it is that complexity of the picture, and the fact that we are having to negotiate this on a year-by-year basis, which is incredibly hard and makes it really difficult for education staff to do what I know they want to do, and that is actually give ongoing stability for staff and parents and young people all of the way through. You know, it is really concerning. And I think when we come on later to look at the PEF funding, we can see where the pressures actually on that PEF funding actually are. And, you know, it is all wrapped up, I think, in all of this.
Thanks, Maureen. You know, we continue to, you know, there's pressures there. Well, there has been a bit of movement, to be fair, from the government, but still a long way from what we're seeking, and we continue to press the case at all these different levels. And I've got a meeting with nationally in Cosler on Friday, and hopefully we'll hear if any progress there, and I'll keep members updated if there are. Eddie.
Sorry, I wouldn't want to move away from this without speaking again, and I've spoken about it before, about the pressures on our education system through the increasing numbers of children with additional support needs. And actually, so it's not only teacher numbers we need a focus. If we're actually looking at, you know, let's support to children and make sure classes run right, it's how we have classroom assistants and other support staff around that as well, speech and language therapy and everything. So that's one focus on, you know, like teacher numbers doesn't tell the total story of what the pressures are that Linda and the team, you know, like experience across the education system. So that increase, you know, up to almost 30% of our children have identified additional support needs is another massive pressure. And again, it's something we'll reflect in the review when we come back to you, you know, to give an understanding of that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eddie. Okay, Maureen. Yeah. Anyone
yes,
else?
Thank you very much. Very helpful last comments. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? What comment? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. We members to page 15, and I'll just very quickly go through this because we've spoken already. Starting at education, you can see here this end of year report shows the earmarking for PEF and for school carry forwards, and as normally the case at this report, that figure of £414,000 is expanded out to show the learning campuses that will be held for. We also see that the underspend of £262,000 in PEF, that's due to timing. That again, that's to do with financial year versus academic year, and quite rightly that goes through. We can see that when you take these matters into account, education ended the year around £2.8 million, but had to earmark a further £700,000, taking that to £3.5 million. We've already spoken about the reasons why that is taking place in the reports, which will come before you after recess. And within the page 18 in communities and economy, you're seeing the red, amber and greens on page 18. And as I said earlier, majority of issues here are being worked on by the Deputy Chief Exec and with colleagues across the services, but noting here that this is around the transition to that new waste collection model. It's a model that is fairly complex, but one which over time will produce payback and resultant savings. But at this moment in time, we're seeing that £1 million overspend within housing and communities, predominantly due to waste, and facilities and property management are there too, and that's the variances in catering, and just as we mentioned all through the year, reflecting the pressure on food costs that has been trailed throughout the year. And on wellbeing, page 19, you can see there that in terms of children and families criminal justice, that £700,000 relates predominantly to out with placements. That was masked maybe over the last years of the pandemic because of funding that came in, but you're now seeing the impact of it with placements, and within community care, that £5.3 million. But as colleagues have touched on, the substantial work that's taken place to bring that back into line. And I suppose just at the foot of page 19, members, and just noting that in terms of housing benefit, council tax reduction, an overspend of just around £1.1 million there, but continuing to provide that support to those in their communities. If I can take you, members, to page 24, and this is the end of my financial year, not end of the school year, but end of the financial year snapshot for Pupil Equity Fund, shown across our learning estate, that shows that for the financial year 2023-24, our schools had a total of around £4.7 million for Pupil Equity Fund. At that 31st of March, they had either spent or had committed £4.4 million of that, leaving £261,000, which will be used between now and the end of the academic year later this month. So the snapshot at March, but recognising that today's figure would be much different. It shows those schools that have decided to underspend their PEF and take that underspend into next academic year. And what you're also seeing, unusually, but perhaps not unusually because it's the way PEF is meant to work, you're seeing schools that are forward banking, or taking forward use of future PEF funding, and in line with their school improvement plan and the work they're doing in their school, so that when the next year's PEF comes in, they will use that to meet the cost of some cost they've already incurred. So just as we do in the council with this ebbing and flowing, and a year-end date of 30th of June or the year-end date of 31st of March shouldn't mean anything to people operationally, you're seeing head teachers now do that same thing, which is good to see, and it shows that financial planning that's at the root of PEF is taking place across our establishments.
So
I'm happy to stop there, Chair.
just 2 points, if I may. One, in terms of school transport, I know meeting I attended with Eddie, with the heads of school teachers, there was some anecdotal evidence of just some concerns there on how we're spending. school transport, and I understand we're considering that as part of the wider review. It's just to have kind of confirmation of that. And also in terms of PEF, I know there's a lot of good practice out there, but do we ever do anything authority-wide to look at some of the good examples of how valuable this investment is in our schools that could be of interest to members? Linda.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I'm probably coming in on your second question there, Chair. So we established very early doors with pupil equity funding a group called the Children and Young People's Impact Forum. And it was designed to discuss issues around about SEF, PEF and KEF, and to avoid being put in jail for acronym use. Obviously, the new Attainment Challenge funding being SEF, the Care Experience funding and being KEF, and obviously PEF as well rehearsed in this chamber. And actually that's the forum to which head teachers present. We've got a learning partner from another council in that space who's also an ex-SAC authority as well. So we bring head teachers along to that particular forum to share that good practice with the group, and so that's taken out. But I really appreciate the commentary there from yourself, Joe, about the creative use of PEF in the schools, and clearly I hope what members note today is that reduction in underspend, around about let's get it spent for the young people that it was always designed to be for, but also that ebb and flow in terms of the kind of forward and backward use of under and overspend, Joe. So really appreciative that that's been noted in the report today. But yes, Leader, we've got a forum for good use of PEF, and that's both a local level and indeed a national level, Leader. So we do make sure the heads share that into that group and also in head teacher meetings as well.
If members are interested, maybe something we could present to Cabinet in a future report. No, but at some point in the year, that'd be. I see a lot of folk nodding in agreement. I think
through you, Leader, delighted to bring something perhaps in the form of a councillor conversation at a later date. Absolutely, through yourself and Cabinet. Yeah,
Councillor Cowan wants this, Elaine.
Thank you. Just on that point, so I really endorse your last suggestion. I know almost a year ago I had suggested that we maybe had some examples in this report rather than it just being a data table. So a presentation and seeing some of the learnings from the different schools and the cross authority, I think would be really, really helpful.
That's good. That's helpful. Just also, Joe, in terms of my point, in terms of the school transfer, that is coming to a review.
Yes, Chair, that'll be included in the scope of the review.
Maureen.
Yes, thank you very much. And Linda, could I just say in general, I know the support that is given and the structures that you've put in place to support school head teachers is incredibly valued, and really I think is beginning to deliver what you had always anticipated it was, and that's across the board. That's from my conversations recently with some head teachers, just asking that direct question, and it's really positive to hear. So good, and please feed back to your central teams how well that's being viewed and supporting the heads in doing that. I think you've got that work across heads and sharing of good practice across heads working well. One very specific question, sticking again with schools, but going back to some of our costs within facilities and property management within that. And I know as we go forward, there are plans by Scottish Government to not universally expand the school meal provision for all of P6 and all of P7, which we probably had hoped by this stage, but within a limited categories within P6 and 7. Now, given that we know that additional food costs have increased, are we in conversation with Scottish Government to ensure that the new funding that they will bring in from next term actually takes account of the realistic costs of food that we are currently experiencing? or is that being set at a level that has already been currently established? Because clearly what I would be looking for here would be something that directly reflects what our experience of real food costs are.
Thanks, Maureen. I don't know if Andrew can shed any light on that, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, the proposals for excuse me, proposals for the increase in free school meals in primary 6 and 7 to be implemented by February next year. February 25 was the date that they've set for that to actually come into play, and it will be children in receipt of the Scottish Child Payment. There is operational groups, and obviously there's discussions at a COSLA level as well in terms of the agreed costs. I do attend regularly the operational group as an area that has been raised. We have had confirmation that the additionality for this year will be an increased unit cost, basically, than previous allocations. So there has been some recognition following the kind of discussions and kind of feedback that authorities have given to the government on this one. There is still a bit of a challenge there in terms of identifying where and how many children are within the Scottish Child Payment within individual schools. We're obviously still working with the government to kind of finalise exactly where those impacts will be. I think from an East Ayrshire point of view, because we are still running the half-price school meals, then I think the impact in terms of numbers will probably not be as significant as maybe elsewhere, but clearly that will still kind of increase the benefit to young people in terms of the ones that will be entitled to that will then get it free as well. So we're still working through that process at the moment for implementation kind of in the new term.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a small point, and it's on page 17, and it says period poverty. And I'd like to suggest that we just change this to period health products. It's we're addressing period poverty, but this is universal, and it goes out to all girls and all women, and it has made such a difference in our schools. So, Amanda, I'm just asking if perhaps we could look to a change in the wording. Thank you, because we are a council that wants to get rid of stigma, whether it's suicide, mental health or period poverty. Thank you.
A lot of nodding heads in agreement, so I think we'll take that as read. That's clear. Okay, Joe.
Thank you. Members, we're on page 27, which is the alternative delivery models. These, as you know, show Ayrshire Roads Alliance and East Ayrshire Leisure Trusts. So ARA as a whole, as a consolidated body, ended the year with a £750,000 underspend in strategic delivery due to vacancies and savings and pension costs, as well as recharges and additional income. What we are seeing is in the South Ayrshire local delivery element, quite a substantial overspend of £1.2 million due to parking income shortfalls, costs associated with additional overtime, street lighting, and fairly substantial EV vehicle charging costs. In East Ayrshire, it's £331,000, significantly less in terms of parking, and we've got costs there in terms of roads maintenance, but they've been offset by Jane and colleagues to try and bring it back into that smaller figure, which is really helpful. At the bottom of that page, we then touch on roads capital. You can see here the bridges and roads resurfacing and the like. But in the last East Ayrshire Performance Report, and I know members have probably been updated since then, but we spoke at length about the works at the bus station funded through the SPT grant and how there was perhaps a risk that that final payment wouldn't be available to us because of the financial pressures being experienced by SPT. We did receive confirmation, and we did receive £880,000 that would allow us to conclude those capital works at the bus station, which is really reassuring and really helpful. The pages for ARA also note the works around the new Cumnock flood prevention scheme. It notes that this is a scheme like all other flood prevention schemes, 80% funded by Scottish Government, 20% by local government. We can see our costs have increased initially from £8.3 million to £9.3 million, and the funding from the council now being at £1.6 million. We have a projected shortfall in funding of around £1 million, which has been worked on, but we also have the potential for the contractor to seek additional payments, and that work is ongoing between senior colleagues across the council to try and support the council's position in that. But in terms of East Ayrshire Leisure Trust, a year where it ended the year almost break even, which is really heartening to see in terms of the pressures being experienced by other leisure trusts. But that £14,000 of an underspend at year end masks a plan that the trustees had to inject £80,000 from reserves during the year into the budget to try and support the budget. So although they've ended the year £14,000 under, they haven't had to call upon that £80,000 either. So quite a good position in terms of the trust and the trust going forward. And Chair, if I can continue, please, just on page 31, it's on Treasury. And very aware that you reviewed the capital programme a few weeks ago, and that revised Treasury Management Report that you'll all be waiting for is being compiled and will come to you after recess. But it shows on the pages just the debt portfolio of the council. It shows where that debt is fixed and with PWLB or elsewhere. And it shows that we've got around £13 million in the bank. That is essentially our working capital as we go forward. And so that's Treasury, but I can explain far more about Treasury, Chair, when I come forward with the revised Treasury management strategy. And at that point, before we move on to capital, I'll stop there for any questions. Thank you.
So, any questions?
Yes, please.
Maureen, yeah.
Sorry, I just couldn't get a hand up quickly enough there. Sorry, Joe, it was just to ask just an overall question. Clearly, you know, £10 million of a variance from where we were in Q3 as a council to where we were at sort of year end in Q4 is something that's substantial. So I suppose that's quite unprecedented in my recollection. You might correct me on that. Is there some action? Is there some overall action that is planned to be taken to ensure that this is not something which is something that surprises us the way I think this has taken us by surprise?
And through you, Chair, I don't think I will correct you because I think it is unique. And for East Ayrshire Council, with a group of members as council and cabinet that meet and instill that sense of sound financial management, then that having an outturn at that position is unusual. It's something that we knew was going to happen, perhaps not to the extent that it did, but we knew that whereas other councils and my counterparts in other councils were experiencing financial challenges, we knew that those wins were going to hit East Ayrshire at some point. And so they are here, but we are well prepared. We have a number of actions taking place. We didn't just wait for the outturn to hit. We were taking action before that to bring things back on budget. There's some things that are fairly easy on that scale, which doesn't have a particularly easy work on it. You know, we're talking to services about bringing budgets back into line wherever possible. We know that in some instances, and it's been touched on in terms of the Integration Joint Board, that will produce some fairly challenging conversations for members and for officers alike. At the year end, unusually, in terms of some of the services that were in surplus, some of those surpluses would normally, in line with the reserve strategy, flow to that service for use the following year. With agreement for those services and recognising the collective work of CMT, we have utilised those underspends and put them into uncommitted balance. So that's what I said at the beginning, around that 3%. First time for a long time, we're at 3% uncommitted balance. We report to Cabinet 4 times a year, but there are 12 periods in the year, 12 accounting periods in the year. And so we've taken a health check at period 2 of the financial year, so that's in May. And that's unusual for us because year ends full swing at the same time too. But we're comparing those figures to give back to CMT, to work with CMT to say this is the implication of that carry forward taking place, and put that on top of the pressures you're already facing. Here is the new figure for this year, and working with services to do that and bringing things back to members. Julie Jameson has also been working on the revision to the financial regulations. They will come before Council at the end of this month. Far more robust. I think the financial regulations were of their day, but certainly with the challenges that local government is facing across Scotland, then there's a need to bolster those financial regulations and to put in place steps where overspends are identified early doors, and those overspends are then, permission is sought from me as a Section 95, and thereafter a recovery plan is put in place within 4 weeks to bring the budget back into line, or to go back to members to request potential additional funds, recognising that you don't have much funds to pass about. But between the addition to the uncommitted balance that gives us headroom, gives us some pump priming money, the £40 million that Council set aside for early intervention and prevention, then yes, we do have an unprecedented outturn, but we have both practical steps taking place at that time, further steps taking place now, and money put by to bolster that support, and that £40 million to reshape and redesign the council going forward. And I think the first part of that is the reports that are going to the next special council, which is the first step in terms of identifying areas where we can take some resource in terms of duplication and the like, but that's what's taken place. So we haven't been standing still. I know that members would not expect us to stand still, but a fair deal amount of work that's taken place, and much, much more to come.
Thanks, Joe. That's helpful. We'll come to some of these discussions later on in the weeks to come. Colleagues, can we, Joe, do you want to move on to the capital?
Certainly. So page 33 is where we start capital. I've touched on the two main points of Dunlop Primary School and also on Thank, which I think were in members' minds at the last, at the most recent capital review. The tables and the pages are as noted. They show a snapshot based on that revised programme, and the Treasury Management report you'll see shortly will flow from this. But Andrew's here to ask to provide any answers. But the text is as noted. But I'm very conscious that the 2 points that were raised were in the covering report.
Thanks, Joe. Maybe just raise the point. I mean, I raised it at the shared services at the ARA report in terms of the shared services about the command multi-story. I don't think we could, emphasise how important this is to, there's a number of businesses in the Foregate that are really struggling, that are looking for a bit of security and a bit of kind of definitive news just in terms of when the project is going to commence and when it's going to be completed. I noticed there's been kind of conflicting reports and dates and completion dates as well. And I find it kind of I think we're all quite dismayed to hear about a possible bat survey, and I think I think that's. I know that these challenges have to be dealt with, but we've got some strong family business that's employing people in that area, and I think there's a bit of irony. One that's been including the pet shop that's been there since ever I remember. As Future's hands, and the outcome of this bat survey prolonging the delay in this removal of the multi-storey car park. And I think what we need to do also is just to maybe give, and I mentioned this, but just for completeness, to give some support round about the businesses during this time of uncertainty, before we can conclude the works. So could we just have some assurances round about the completion and the works, and we'll help the business as much as we can during this period.
Thank you, Leader. Certainly, we recognise and absolutely understand the importance of this capital project to the implications to the traders. And obviously, we've had recent conversations both at Shared Services Committee and at the Kilmarnock Strategic Group. As soon as we have the results of the BAT survey that you mentioned, we'll make sure that members are informed, and I've made a commitment to meet with the traders along with colleagues in the council to keep them updated in terms of the timescales thereafter. So that assurance is absolutely there through you, Leader, that we'll do that.
Right, Richard, that's really helpful. Members, anything else? Maureen?
Thank you again, and it is welcoming the work that has been promised on Thank in terms of the supported learning centre, and noting, of course, that some of the factors behind that are not things that we would want to see repeated. And with a view to that, may I also just highlight that in conversation with parents and staff within Mount Carmel, there is real disappointment that no approach has been agreed to deal with some of what are equally viewed as health and safety issues in relation to Mount Carmel, and that is in terms of the external paths and actually sort of children being able to move from cars, some of them with some additional support needs, actually into school. And I wonder if consideration has been given to making that work a priority across the summer holidays, because clearly waiting until there's an incident isn't really the approach that we choose to take as a council.
Thanks, Maureen. I understood from our walk round that some of these issues were being actioned, but it's disappointing if that's not the case. But Richard, do you want to come in?
Through you, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Mackay. I don't have the detail with me specific to Mount Carmel. Clearly, if there are health and safety concerns and worries, then we would want to address those as a matter of some urgency. Happy to pick that up with colleagues and keep members updated, but rest assured we'll take that forward as a matter of urgency.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's Maureen. Okay.
May I also, may I also just come back and ask just one question, and that is welcoming, of course, the Galston office facilities, that we will finally get to a conclusion with that. But clearly, since this work was commissioned, we have seen very significant changes in how we actually use office space. So do we have some advanced and updated intentions for how we are actually going to use these Galston office spaces once we actually have access to them in the next 6 months? Thank you.
So, Eddie, is at that point you come in?
Yeah, I can pick up too. The first point was a more flippant. It was when we were talking about Mount Carmel, and without opening this up to every school show, I was up there last night, and the children were doing Matilda the musical, and it was absolutely fantastic. Absolutely loved it. There, and the second point around Galston, we absolutely have, adjusted what we're doing, and clearly, with the library going to move up there now, and a whole range of different things. So I think we do need to come back in detail with you about the use of that, the use of flexible spaces as well as dedicated spaces for the library for that. And again, ourselves and some of the local members went a walk around in terms of the actual site. And the intention to use some of the existing furniture in different ways, etc., is really quite exciting. So looking forward to that.
Thanks, Eddie. Okay, Joe. Is it people? Is it Amanda?
Thanks, Chair. Morning, members. The people pages start on the summary report, page 38, with the absence statistics being in page 39, noting that for this period there were 4,283 employees absent, which is an increase of 130 for the same period last year, but noting that the workdays lost has decreased by 743, which results in a small decrease in the workdays lost by 0.47. The 5 top reasons for absence remain unchanged for the top 4 from the same period last year. Stress, personal stress being number 1, musculoskeletal, operations recovery and stomach abdominal. The 5th reason has changed from last year being coronavirus to colds, flus and URTIs. Short-term absence makes up equivalent to 9.47 days lost per employee, which is a very slight decrease from the same period last year of 0.12, and long-term absence is 4.43 workdays lost, which again is a small decrease of 0.49 from the same period last year. For members, we brought a cabinet paper last August, and it's our intention to bring one August, September this year to update the work since last year, and with further proposals to how we can address the absence rates further. Occupational health activities in page 40, there's an increase in the occupational health appointments by 270, the early interventions by 45 and physiotherapy by 66 on the same period last year. In page 44, you'll note that the head count from the same period last year is up 23, but decreased 5 from the last quarter. Also on page 42, members will see the breakdown of jobs and training fund. Within the council, we've recruited 140. We have in place 140 employees, and this is a slight decrease from the last time of 12, but this is due to individuals that were in apprenticeships gaining posts both within and out with the council. In addition, there's 37 apprentices and 4 interns employed in local businesses supported by the jobs and training grants. And in terms of this financial year, we've had bids from service for 28 apprentices, 2 graduate apprentices and 10 graduate interns, which exceeds our target of 200 by 21. Also on page 42 even, notes the recruitment, noting that there's still difficulties in recruiting and attracting in most services, and work's ongoing to further develop opportunities for succession planning through work, jobs and training, and looking at more ways to make posts more attractive. Page 43 details the number of employees leaving the council. The breakdown of that is 29 through retirement, 68 resignations, and then a few other reasons for ill health and disciplinary. The payroll activities on page 43 show that the number of terminations increased by 486 for the same period of last year, and this is due to the reduction on the bank posts across services. Communications overview is on page 44, and it highlights activities and campaigns and notes our accessibility journey continues at a pace as the project team works to fulfil the accessibility action plan. There's also a review underway in Stay Connected Gov delivery system, and a refresh on the databases being cleansed. Organisational development performance key areas on page 44 and 45 provides members with details of the online induction modules, leadership programmes, mentoring programmes and FaceTime engagement. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Amanda. That's a really great news story in terms of page 42 in terms of apprenticeships. So we exceeded our target of 200, and we see broken down there just to see some more in terms of secure full-time jobs and some employed out with. Just that conscious effort that we made to recruit get young people jobs and apprenticeships is really, must be the envy of most other local authorities the length and breadth of Scotland. So it's a big well done there. Members, any other points? Morning.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to commend that work as well, and also noting the impact that that work has had in terms of our profile when it comes to staff, in terms of our staff numbers on people below the age of 25, and seeing the increase in that. So again, it's not just providing the apprenticeships, but it's actually giving back to us for the investment that we have made in these young people, what we are actually getting out of that as a business, and getting our succession planning right. So yes, indeed, well done.
Thanks, Maureen. Okay, so there's Eddie.
Sorry, Leader. It's just I wouldn't want to pass without talking about absence levels. I mean, clearly we spoke earlier about the overall financial position of the council, and therefore I think it's important to highlight that this is something that everyone in CMT takes absolutely seriously in terms of absence, both for the welfare of the employees and the financial implications for the council. And indeed, Amanda and the team, I know, have been looking at what additional support can we give centrally, from her team, to services to actually address, areas of absence wherever we can. As I say, with that dual aim about the well-being of our employees and the cost to the councils, because it is a significant cost.
Thanks, Eddie. Claire.
Just to agree with what Maureen said about the apprentices, I think we're all very proud of our apprenticeships, but I'd also think it's only fair to point out the mentoring programme as well is going very successfully, and the coaching too. And there's some beautiful quotes in there on page, wrong glasses, 45 on the mentoring. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Okay, has everyone had their hands? Okay, we go into health and safety. David.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. If I could just begin with drawing members' attention to top of page 47. In the summary report, number of non-reportable incidents to the health and safety section has increased by 669 in comparison to last year, while the incidents reportable to HSE have decreased by 6. As I reported to Cabinet previously, and the main increase in non-reportable incidents is due to are being driven by incidents involving staff directly engaged in supporting young people with dysregulated behaviours. Incidents under that category accounted for 68% of all incidents reported to Health and Safety team, and as you would expect, Chair, work is ongoing in collaboration with educational colleagues and our trade unions to implement practical control measures to try and reduce this number. Again, when I focus on minimising incidents and accidents in the workplace, just to give some broader focus on health and safety, the focus this year is going to be on physical hazards, including dust, vibration and noise in the workplace. And we'll again be supporting housing asset services later this year with our WorkSafe programme. And I'm pleased to say we'll also be supporting ARA as they launch their WorkSafe programme this month, in fact. Moving on, we'll also be working in collaboration with colleagues in cleansing our comms team, along with our partners in Scottish Fire and Rescue, to create an awareness campaign around the dangers of lithium-ion batteries in the waste industry. Members will be aware of the fire last month in Western Road Depot, and also the fire in April at Winning, the battery plant, which caused extensive disruption and damage to the town. Nationally, there are 1,200 lithium-ion batteries fires in bin lorries and waste each year, and that's an increase of 71% if you look at 22 figures. So this joint promotional campaign will seek to raise awareness in the public of the dangers that these batteries present in the waste stream, and also provide advice and assistance in safe routes of disposal. The rest of the report's for noting, Chair, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, David. Maybe just in violence and aggression, both in school, educational establishments and out with, both are up. Is there any kind of reasons for that just now, or is it in what kind of action are we taking?
It's pretty much the same as it's always been. It tends to be really focused in particular cases, and without being specific to schools here, Chair, what we find is a continued trend of dysregulated behaviours with a small number of young people who are known well to education, and also within our children's houses as well. In terms of the action we're taking, we meet quarterly with our trade unions and the Chief Executive Strategy Group, where violence and aggression is a standing item on the agenda. There's also a meeting with a Strategic Inclusion Group for Education. I also chair a meeting with trade union colleagues and educational colleagues focusing on violence and aggression, and we met last month. There's going to be a redrafted relationships and behaviour framework for educational establishments, along with a number of other resources to try and bring the figures down. But it's an incredibly challenging area. I meet regularly with my colleagues across Scotland and my peers across Scotland, and everyone else has the same issues. And this is a standing item in those meetings as well, so we can try and share best practice with possible, Chair.
Thanks, David. Linda, do you want to come in on that?
I think through you, Chair, I think David's given an excellent answer to that question. Clearly, the fact that it's a nationwide issue doesn't deter us as a council from continuing to try our best to limit these issues. But again, and once again, Chair, I need to note from an educational context, as we approach the end of the year, these incidents only get worse in terms of dysregulation from some of the young people concerned, as we've seen in other areas of kind of daily life. So ultimately, Chair, just to re-emphasise that which David has put forward in terms of trying to deal with this from a strategic perspective, it's about how we deal with dysregulation. Our staff are incredibly gifted in this area, but there's always work to be done to try and make sure that that's consistent as well, but also support staff who have been at the really difficult end of some of these really quite concerning attacks by young people in certain areas. And again, we'll continue to support them in that space.
Thanks, Linda. No, I appreciate the work that we're doing on this, and it is a national issue, but nonetheless, we've got to do our best we can to protect our staff and their young people and others from harm as well. And I know we're doing a lot of innovative work there, which I'm pleased to see. Okay, members, any other comments? Okay, Clint.
Thank you, Chair. So page 50, and it's maybe starting off by just noting that Cabinet yourself approved in April the positive engagement policy that replaced our unacceptable actions policy, and that new policy endorsed the work and the supports to council employees to manage challenging service user behaviour and engagement. And that's especially relevant given the work that's taken place in terms of digital, which I hope to report to Cabinet in the coming months. The complaints at Q4 slightly up since Q3, but when you look at the total complaints for the year compared to the year before, they're broadly similar. The table shows those at stage 1, stage 2, and those that were escalated, noting that 42 were closed with a full response given. Improvement actions show the services where those reflections and considerations on improvement actions were based and the actions that they will take. And over the page, we see just that statistic on the number of days, or the average number of days. We are performing better at stage 1, probably similar in stage 2, and escalations slightly more time than was previously the case before. And if I can, Chair, just moving on to risks, start on page 53. These risks were reviewed by CMT on the 18th of April. No new risks have been added to our corporate risk register, nor have the status of any of the risks changed. They have been updated to reflect new and emerging issues or actions that have taken place to further mitigate those risks, but they are as listed. And if I can, Chair, before I seek questions, take you to the recommendations there on paragraph 3 at page 3. Of those 9 recommendations, 7 for noting, 2 for approval. The first is to approve the £1.295 million, which, as I mentioned earlier in relation to Councillor Mackay's point, are underspends in governance and corporate support and essential services that, instead of being added to those budgets going forward, they have instead been added to the uncommitted balance to provide that headroom and that support going forward. And secondly, to seek formal approval to transfer the £700,000 to renewal and repairs, and just under £1 million to the capital fund, given the slippage, the reprofiling, of our capital programme and the implications that had for our debt charges. And I'm happy to stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, I'm happy to move the recommendations. Anyone otherwise minded? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Joe, for that report. And now go to item 3, which is Ayrshire Roads Alliance Active Travel Strategy Performance Report. Jane first, and then David.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to provide an update on the Active Travel Forum, existing active travel projects and the changes to external grant funding, and David will take you through it. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. The Council had approved the creation of the Active Travel Forum on the 22nd of February 2024, and the first meeting of the Active Travel Forum was held on the 28th of March. Subsequent meetings have not been held as initially proposed. However, it is intended to arrange regular monthly meetings starting in August after summer recess. To complement the Active Travel Forum and the Community Action Group, as noted in the previous paper, the Ayrshire Roads Alliance will work in partnership with colleagues within vibrant communities and the climate change team to engage with the young people and local businesses to promote and encourage significant and lasting behaviour change in favour of active travel. It's proposed that the active travel strategy, once approved, will be reviewed annually and that any amendments will be presented to the Active Travel Forum for approval. The Ayrshire Roads Alliance will submit a proposal to the Active Travel Forum for consideration, which identifies priority projects to be taken from the active travel strategy and any council place-based plans. The aim of this priority list is to seek prior approval, which will streamline the process and assist in the quick delivery of these projects when and if further funding becomes available. Historically, the Ayrshire Roads Alliance compiled capital bid applications for traffic, transportation and active travel projects across the network to SPT, Surstrands and SCSP. In addition, the Scottish Government also provided East Ayrshire Council grant funding for cycling, walking and safer routes via the direct block grant. Transport Scotland have recently undertaken a major review in the way that the capital funding for active travel projects will be allocated to local authorities in future, and these changes may cause significant ramifications to council funding in future years and are detailed within the report. The primary changes in relation to the discontinuation of several of the grant awards previously noted, including SPT, Smarter Choices, Smarter Places and CWSR. These previous funding streams will be replaced by a new direct block grant received by each council for the delivery of active travel. The block grant forms a Tier 1 funding stream, and this grant will be accessible to the local authorities. Tier 1 funding will be issued to council as part of the annual block grant, and although it will be detailed within the grant, it will not be ring-fenced for active travel projects. However, applications for Tier 2 funding, which is construction funding, and future annual increases to Tier 1 funding will be dependent on the council providing evidence that the previous year's funding, Tier 1, has been used for active travel projects. And I'm happy to stop here and take questions.
Thanks, David. Any questions? Maybe just what, in terms of any future programmes, will there be consultation with members and communities? What's the kind of format would that take?
Yeah, going forward, Chair, the intention is to work with the Active Travel Forum and take proposals to them. We'll also bring update papers to Cabinet, and regular members' briefings will be issued for each project as they're going forward.
Thanks. Okay. Everyone's happy? Edit?
Sorry, just to say, you know, again, and we've had this conversation with Richard, Jane and David, it's the opportunity, wherever it is, to join up with wider agendas within the council, for instance, the safe routes to school, etc. So when we see resources that this comes in, clearly it has to be used for the purpose there, but often we can align it to some of the other priorities that we have set as a council, and we'll be doing that and making sure we're cross-cutting every time we can with these types of resources.
Good, that's reassuring. Okay, can we agree the recommendations? Okay, and thanks, David. Thanks, Jane. And on to item 4, which is school term dates. And Kenneth there.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm here. The school term dates reports starting on page 68 of your papers this morning sets out what is being asked of Cabinet today. We have, as is normal practice, earlier in the year we had met with colleagues from North and South Ayrshire to discuss with them their proposed pattern of school term dates for the session 25-26. And the three Ayrshires agreed to align as far as we practically could the main term dates for that particular session or school year. That then led to the authority of our education service consulting with parent councils, staff groups, teaching unions, church reps and others earlier on in the year, offering two options in terms of term dates and school closure dates. The overwhelming majority, more than 60%, more than 90% of respondents had indicated that their preference was for option 2, which is set out in Appendix 1 of your papers in page 72. And it was agreed following a meeting with the teaching unions, their preference was also for option 2 as well. So the proposal today is that Cabinet are asked to approve the school term dates set out in Appendix 1 and also approve the school closure in service and leave days set out in Appendix 2. Now, Appendix 2 follows a pattern of distribution of school closure days, which has been agreed through our LNCT, which at the time was our joint negotiating committee, which is JNCT 1902, which is page 74 and Appendix 3 of your packs. There's nothing untoward in terms of the proposals that have been put forward. They followed standard practice in terms of the distribution of school term dates and the allocation of leave and closure days. I'm happy to take any questions from any members that there might be.
Thanks, Kenneth. Members, any questions, comments? We're happy with these. Okay, I'll move the recommendation. Can we agree option 2 is proposed within the recommendations? Okay. No dissent. Thanks for that. That's the end of our E items. And we'll give a couple of minutes for members to leave. You folk that are working it remotely don't know how lucky you are to stand up and down every couple of... Okay, we'll continue the business. We'll get on to item 5, which is Local Development Plan 2, supplementary guidance on Loudon Castle Estate. And Pamela Clifford, going to present the report to the Pamela.
Thank you, Leader. We have another report before Cabinet for supplementary guidance, which is associated with Local Development Plan 2. This time it's on Loudon Castle and Estate. In terms of Local Development Plan 2, it identifies Loudon Castle and Estate as a miscellaneous development opportunity under policy RU-M2, which stipulates that Council will support the development of tourist and leisure and tourist accommodation and the housing only as part of a mix with these associated uses. The site, members will be aware that the site includes an A-listed Loudon Castle and the nationally recognised garden and designed landscape. In terms of policy Tour 6, which gives actually more detail in terms of Loudon Castle Estate Garden and Designed Landscape, that covers a range of matters such as the hierarchy of acceptable uses, site assets, phasing and application requirements. This supplementary guidance will give greater detail and support these policies. So paragraph 7 of the report, page 79, refers to Appendix 1 of the report, which shows how the guidance is broken into key sections. This draft supplementary guidance will be undergo consultation for 4 weeks. If there are substantial changes which have come back as a result of consultation, it will come back to a future cabinet on that. So this morning we're asking for the cabinet to agree approval of the publication of the Loudon Castle and Estate document as draft supplementary guidance on that, and otherwise note the contents of the report. I'm happy to take any questions, and I've got Rachel Hall as well here, who has played a big part in putting together the supplementary guidance for any questions of members.
I think it's really helpful, given some of the previous applications that's been on for this site and the interest that there is in the site. Members, Maureen.
Sorry, thank you very much again. And could I just say how glad I am, having lived through and sat through lots of the discussions. I just really want to say clearly nothing that we do is ever lost, and I think this is really very good evidence of that. Clearly there was a great deal of learning that came through, and what we have got some here in the supplementary guidance is something that pulls together all of the experiences that we've had with as a council with this site, and also it evidences, and I love all the graphics within it and the photographs within it, which shows the work and the knowledge of various aspects of our council team and our experts within the council actually pulled together in terms of this supplementary guidance. I think it actually gives a really good on-the-shelf document for us to have, and really does set forward what our ambition is for the site, and hopefully gives future developers and interests very clear frameworks and starting point for their consideration. And I hope that Scottish ministers are satisfied with it.
Thanks very much, Maureen. I think we totally agree with there. Just to be, I know we referred to in the report about MPF4, the infrastructure first. I mean, that's a key issue for the whole site. Is there a need to elaborate that, or do we just within the where do we put that?
Yeah, I'll refer to Rachel in a second on that. In terms of the infrastructure sort of approach, it is included within the document on that. But as you're aware, there are a number of key strategic issues that need to be brought into the mix. It certainly isn't a straightforward site to take forward, and welcome the comments of Councillor Mackay in terms of the guidance and the work that has been put into it by sort of Karen Purvis's team in particular. I think Alice McCain and Rachel Hall have been extensively involved in it. I do think it is a really good sort of piece of work, and really sets out the position and the standing of the council to the present owner and any future developers of the site. But certainly infrastructure is certainly embedded within the document. Rachel, is there anything further you want to add?
Thank you, Pamela. Yes, in terms of the document, we do reference National Planning Framework 4, and we include a list of applicable policies, and the need for capacity and infrastructure requirements to be in place for the development to be achieved is clear kind of throughout the document. And we do reference that we don't desire there to be a new residential community that there isn't infrastructure or capacity for, or services in place in terms of education, healthcare, etc. And I do think that the document reflects that clearly.
No, thanks for that. Just to a bit of clarity, and that's really helpful. So good piece of work. I think we'd all agree with that, absolutely. Anyone else? No. Well, if that's the case, can we go to recommendations? Thank you for all that work, and can we agree with recommendations, paragraph 2? Okay, and now have to move exclusion of press and public.